Podcast.
Mr.
Hello.
Hello here.
Good
Hello
evening,
there.
sir. Good evening.
Good to have you on. Thank you. So
Yeah.
let's see. Jim Keilt, husband to Eleanor,
Yes.
who was also a professional musician. I'm
Yeah.
led to believe.
Yeah.
Father to two wonderful kids, Jim and Joanne.
Yeah.
And you have been a professional musician pretty much all your life, bar a brief spell in the civil service when you left school before turning back to your real passion. And I think to many of us, well, certainly to myself, Graham and Graham, you are Mr. Guitar throughout Glasgow. Thanks to many decades of jam sessions and gigs in various bands. And obviously, latterly, you've taken posting some fantastic online lessons and tips and encouragement to hundreds, if not thousands, of other people who may one day follow in your footsteps. And today we're going to chat about the depth of your distinguished career in music from the early years to the present day, and obviously what on earth the future holds. Secondly, we're going to talk equipment, as you have beautifully positioned yourself in your own guitar shop. And as you can see from the vaster instruments behind you, we will focus on guitar, but also effects, amplification and sound preferences you might have perfected over the years. And then the final thing, if that's not enough, is to try and cram in a section on all the various masses of charitable foundations, causes, live bands, jam sessions you've been involved with over the years. So from State Bar Blues Band to CTF and up until current day. So yeah, and then obviously we want to spend some time talking about Lonehead, who are fantastic. So we're looking forward to talking about that. So welcome, Jim. Great to see you. I think it's probably best to start at the start, which is logical. So can I ask to cast your mind back a bit to your childhood?
Just a short way.
Yeah, just a short step. So things like songs on the radio, what parents and friends were listening to that planted the small seed and started the rock and roll journey for you?
Well, it started probably unbeknownst to me. It started, my dad was a professional musician. And I was born in London. We lived in London, and he played, on occasion played with Cleo Lane and stuff like that. And I got my first guitar for it would be my second Christmas, a real guitar. The guitarist in my dad's band got me this real guitar. And I can remember, so I would be about a year and a half, and I remember them putting this guitar on me. And there was a few people there, obviously my parents, but there must have been my uncle Alec that gave me the guitar. He must have, because I can remember them putting this guitar on me and me kind of tottering like this, as they laughed. It's just a shame they didn't have mobile phones, but that disappeared along with my father when I was about 5. So obviously there's a kind of a musical background, although my mum was tone deaf, literally tone deaf, which was a weird combination. Perhaps, if you've heard me, it's a combination that you recognise in me.
Not at all.
Musician, tone deaf. But I can remember, there's all sorts of stuff. My dad's family, there's a lot of music with them. Probably the thing, like, all my age group, it would be, there was the Shadows, then the Beatles was the revelation. But I still, I started my first band about then when I was 10 at primary school. It wasn't really a band, but we got together and we tried to write songs and things. Then what really got me, what the one that made me think was, I want to do this, was Cream, and it was Eric Clapton playing Crossroads. And I remember thinking, oh, I can do a bit of it. I've got a guitar. I could maybe do that. And that was probably the thing that set me off. I got my first electric when I was 12, but I kind of just dabbled from there. So that would be, I probably heard Crossroads when I was about 15, something like that. And that was the one that really set me off. Mm-hmm. Although I'm going to go back before even you guys' time. It was Los Indios. Yeah. That was
got to number 1, Jim, I think.
Yeah,
Way back, must have been late 50s or something.
that's right. Well, that I can remember just playing that and playing that. So there was a sound about the guitar, like, you know, like all guitar players. I think there's just a thing that where you get, oh, there's that sound. But it was, I've got to say, it was Crossroads with Eric Clapton with Cream that was the one that really got me, and I still pursue that. You know, that's still, if you put that on, that drives me. Still, you know.
Brilliant. So, I mean, thinking back in the early years, and I know you've been interviewed about this before, Jim. So I think talking about the interview was talking about your first gig, and I think rather humorously, it was very nearly in a YMCA, but it wasn't, as it so turned out.
Yes. Yes, it was next door, and that was the first one. We carried the gear. I lived in Rutherglen at this point, and as you possibly know, it was that thing at first gig. We carried all the equipment. We got friends, and we carried it all in to Bothwell Street, and it was the bass player. He was the only one. He worked. The rest of us were at school, and Peter worked, and he's a CTF member as well still, as with most of the band. Only one of them isn't. He lives in Australia. And we carried all the gear in to Bothwell Street, and it was, I think it was in the YMCA offices or something, but we were standing outside, it was all locked up, and we were waiting, and Peter arrived, and we're going to say, it's locked up, and he said, oh, no, it's next door. And we went in, but this, you know, we wanted to be Cream of Led Zeppelin, and you know, we had the hair. We were 16 with the hair and the hippie garb, you know, all this kind of thing. Oh, sorry?
Fur coats.
Yes.
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 That's my granny's fur coat on there. That tells you how bad it was, Jim.
That's the one. Yes. I was we were trips in, and it was a pensioners club. And it was, you know, it's a weird thing, and I don't know, you possibly would know this a bit from me with CTF, but the thing is, although I have got a certain thing, a certain persona, a certain thing that I do, the main thing that I can do is, and it comes from parties, and like, you know, my parents, you know, well, my mum, but my family, my uncles and aunts, family gatherings, I would play guitar. So I knew songs from the turn of the last century, you know, like the 1890s, songs from that, and I would back my uncles and aunts in like Perry Como and all this kind of stuff. So a pensioners club wasn't, even at 16 or 17, it wasn't a huge problem to me.
Aye.
It was only a possibility. But what we discovered was the mic was live, and I still don't understand the electrics of this, but the only way that we could actually make the PA work was if one of the girls who was with us had to hold the mic stand and touch the PA amp at the same time.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Health and safety disaster.
That's how we did it. And she actually sang, get us to take us out of home. She sang a couple of songs. She was actually a really good singer, and she sang a couple of songs. Someone else was going to take a turn of doing that. But it was very good, and you know, the club was, they were very kind to us and very nice. And then we finished, and you know, it was probably, looking back, I think it would probably be like then, it would be a 10 o'clock finish. So at the end of the night, we got all the gear down, and we had to walk the gear through town to Rutherglen. And some of us had to stay and wait because we could only, there was so much gear that we had to take it in turns to walk to Rutherglen, walk back, take the gear. Eventually, a parent took pity on us and got a taxi for someone in the gear. I think it was Peter, took a lot, managed to get the last lot of gear in, and the rest of us just walked with our guitars.
Yeah, and bear in mind, back in the day, those things they weighed a ton, didn't they? These speaker cabs and amps. It wasn't the light stuff like it was today.
No.
Well, I think it would be slightly different today. If a 16 or 17-year-old rocked up to play a gig and it ended up being in a pensioner's home, it would be, the music's rather different now, I would guess, than it was back then.
Yeah.
But I think, so that's an interesting thing. So thinking about the gig scene as it was, and I know it's probably a question you've been asked many times, but the way that the gig scene started in Glasgow and how it kind of evolved. But you must see some real changes over the years in how it actually looks today and the saturation point it's got, because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of musicians wanting to play every Friday, Saturday night now, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, as you possibly know, I teach as well. Now, I can remember you guys probably have got a similar thing. When I was at school, there was actually a couple of what ended up as good, fairly big bands, folk. It was more folk things. But when I was at school, I would say there was probably, that I know of, there would be a maximum of, there was quite a few guitar players, but there would probably be 3, 4 electric guitar players at the school. When I was teaching classes, and there was a dozen guitar players in a class. You know, so yeah, I mean, it was. I think what drew me to it, and I think draws a lot of people to it, was that exclusive feeling. You know, that thing where there was only you, and everyone went, "Oh, there's Jim, the guitar player."
Yeah.
Well, that's what I like to think that they said. I suspect they might have said other things, but yeah, well, there's a Jim, the guitar player. So you that feeling, but I think now, yeah, it's, you know, you just go onto YouTube and there's a dizzying array of young people. I mean, I teach people that, you know, I've taught kids of 9 who could play stuff that I couldn't play when I was 30. Martin, our bass player's daughter, is fundamentally self-taught. He taught her everything he knows in about a week. And she's just ridiculous. You know, it's ridiculously good.
Jim, can I ask you,
Brilliant.
when you were playing then in bands, could you take us through the path of the bands you played with till you got into sort of, oh well, a little bit more of the sort of big time? How did that sort of happen?
Well, I started off just the usual thing, you know, bands about Glasgow, not bands that you would have heard of, but probably, you know, people maybe that you would have heard of, Bees Knees, a band called Sunrise, and I did a lot of kind of club stuff. That was probably my slight regret, is that I started earning money really, really quickly with bands. And I started, you know, just the way that it went, I get involved in a lot of bands that were doing a lot of nights, earning a lot of good money. And I wish that a wee bit more that I had done less of that and done more. I did some, you know, like in the Burns House and things like that. I wish I'd done more of that. It set me up well for my future, you know.
How was your apprenticeship?
Yeah, and I learned a lot through that. So I did all that. Then it got to, I think it's 1976. I decided, my friend and I decided that we would go down to London. But probably the first really good gig that I got was as the guitar player in Tommy. It was the first stage production of Tommy.
Wow, brilliant.
And that was great. And
yeah.
I had, you know, I saw Roy's.
Yeah.
And it was great. But I was like, Roy, the Who have come to see me. Hey, that Roy.
Claim to fame.
It was great. The Who came to see it. And I was chatting away for ages to Pete Townsend. We were talking guitars and talking stuff. And Pete said to me, you know, we're talking about great guitar players and, you know, people that we knew and who we didn't like. They said, you're a great guitar player. I said, thanks, Pete. I said, I'm just playing all your parts. He said, I know. So there was that. And just after that, I auditioned for the Scorpions, right? And I had a disaster. I'd taken this, I didn't use pedals, but going to auditions, I decided it was too much of a lottery. You didn't know what amp you were going to get. Was it something you knew? And, you know, so I thought, I'm going to get an overdrive pedal. I've never used an overdrive pedal. I thought, I'm going to get an overdrive pedal and that'll help me. Took it along. I just turned it all up full and turned it up. And it was how I didn't know what to do. It only arrived, I only got it the morning of that.
What's the first
So that was
really
a bit of
many
a
gig?
flip.
Never take new equipment to a gig, yeah.
Oh. So that was me. But the next day I did an audition for John Otway, and I thought, right, no pedal, into the amp again. So I did, and fortunately the amp they had was a Selmer treble and bass 50, like that one there, and I knew the amp. So it was great, it had a great audition, so got the job. So I replaced Wild Willie Barrett, and I became mild Jim Keilt. And that was great. Did some great gigs with him and some great recordings, and did the Reading Festival. That was a career highlight. We were on with the likes of Patti Smith and Faulkner and all this, and it felt great, although terrifying. I remember walking out on the stage. That was by far the biggest gig that I'd done. I remember just, kind of sorting my gear and then turning around and looking out, and just as far as you could see,
see your faces.
And that was slightly like, whoa. And then we started, and the monitors weren't working, and I had to run over to the drummer because I couldn't hear the drummer. I had to run over and pose like I was posing next to the drummer. All I was trying to do was just hear him to keep time. But that was great fun. I got Midge Ure recommended me for Thin Lizzy.
Brilliant.
And that was when he did the stint when Gary Moore left. So he'd done this, he was doing this, but he was a friend of a friend, basically from my hometown, a friend of a friend. So a friend in common had said to me, so he said, yeah. So he phoned me. He was really, he was brilliant, I have to say. He phoned me up and talked me through it. He said, look, he said, they've been doing auditions. What they're getting through, he says, it's not what they're looking for. They're looking for a more modern approach. Still want to rock, but more modern approach. So he told me where this new clothes shop, this boutique type place that they were buying their clothes. So I went in and got an outfit. It cost me a fortune. But then it was my wife, girlfriend in. And we went in, got this outfit. So my audition was on the Thursday. I learned everything. I learned, do like Black Rose, all the jigs and Gary Moore stuff. And it was murder. Mitch phoned me up on the Thursday morning and said, sorry, Phil's got an abscess. And they're not doing auditions today. Can you come along at lunchtime on Monday? Yeah. So he's talking me through. He says, listen, he said, your chances are really good. So great. So Monday came, just about to leave the house to go. Phone goes, it's Midge. He says, really sorry, Jim. Someone's just come in and got it. It was Dave Flett, from Manfred Mann, a fellow Scot. And he only lasted a Japanese tour. But yeah, so that was that.
Other than that, in terms of bands you've played in, what would be your highlight possibly? Other than Lonehead.
Lonehead, I've got to say, is my favourite band that I've ever played with.
Yeah.
There was, I was with, I don't know if you remember the Look, I Am the Beat. They did a big hit, number 2 at the time, the Beat, and I played with the Look, and that was great. They were a great bunch of guys, and we did a British tour, and that was great. I was middle of the road twice.
Yeah.
The first time was difficult, but the second time was great. It was really weird. They were playing phenomenal. This would be early 90s, mid 90s, early to mid 90s was my second time. And they were playing stadiums. There was one gig we did in Berlin, and it was the week before, it was David Bowie, then it was us, and then it was Bryan Adams the following week. So that's the kind of place we're playing. And it was, see, they had a lot more hits over there in Germany. And so that, I loved a lot of the gigs we did. The problem, although, like anything, I can enjoy any music, but okay, there was a wee bit, what I used to describe it was like it was like a photograph. It was like you being a photograph of being a rock star. You know, it was, yeah, you were doing all these big venues, but you were playing music. It wasn't, you know, probably when I was at school, I remember when I thought I was going to be in Led Zeppelin, middle of the road were the Antichrist. You know, it was, and then that's when, and it was a great band, the musicianship and everything, that was fantastic. But it was just that thing, that's not what I wanted. You know, it was so weird over there because we did a gig, we were on with Uriah Heep, middle of the road, and Uriah Heep and the Village People, all in the one gig in the one night.
Uriah Heep and the Village People, that's a unique combination, isn't it?
We were on right after, middle of the road, we're on right after Uriah Heep. And the place was full, it was, you know, big venue, and I just, there was a weird thing, but really what I wanted to be with was Uriah Heep.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Amazing, absolutely. Can I ask you, Jim, what gave you the idea of going back in time of jam sessions? You know, like the State Bar jam session. What actually triggered that all off?
That was kind of thrust upon me. I had never really played blues in a blues band, and you know, I played like all of us. I played blues songs in bands, you know, but I never really played in an out-and-out blues band, except for a couple of dep jobs with a band called the Red Greens Blues Band with Al Fleming, and I did a couple of deps with them. But anyway, I got the call, and I thought this would be good fun, a blues band for a month, and it just kept going and going. So from that, I started becoming a kind of a jam guy. And then I also I joined Independence in Sammy Dow's and did the jam night in there. And then I really started becoming a kind of the jam guy.
That's a good opportunity to meet other musicians as well, isn't it?
Oh,
and
yeah.
just do a bit of networking. And I actually saw one of the videos on YouTube of you playing the jam session in the Old Swan, and I think you know you have a mutual friend of mine, Brian Thompson.
Oh yes,
he's a great guitarist.
Oh, brilliant, great bloke.
Jim, can I ask you? I mean, it's obviously a testimony to the way you went about it in the beginning. That here, what I don't know, 30 years later or whatever it is, I don't know how many years. It's sadly, you know, if it wasn't for COVID, would be still going strong. I don't know how many guitarists, bass players, singers, drummers must have come up on stage. And as Graham said, you've met them all, you've played with them all. Tell me, have you ever had any sort of big surprises or unexpected happenings or moments where you thought, oh yes or oh no?
We've had a few, I mean, we've had some great players come in, but the worst one of all for me was when Amos Garrett, who played the guitar solo on Midnight at the Oasis, and just a glorious player, and he came in all the way from America, and he came in, and it was the only night to cancel. There was a big football match on, there went into extra time, and at the end of the day, we couldn't play. And so Amos couldn't play. And that, I was like, of all it's 25 years next year, and of all those years, there's Amos Garrett. The one night that we can't go on is the night he's there. Oh, a few. Alan Thompson's in all the time, who obviously has played with everyone from Phil Collins to Ron Martin and all that. He's a regular. So, yeah, I think one of the successes and one of the failures of the State Bar is that we do not discriminate. It's not, you know, I know some jam sessions that have gone on in Glasgow, they want a certain standard of person that we don't.
I do remember sort of through 2000 upwards, there would be kind of a core group of musicians that would appear each Tuesday, and you could almost see the guitar cases lined up, and then there would be some pianos arrived and some more harmonica.
It became that. It became that, and it's still kind of that. It's become more compartmentalised. I don't know if that's the right word, really. But, you know, there is generally now, it's a set group. The set group changes, it morphs into another set group, but it is a fairly set group with a few irregulars.
Jim, something that I'm always very aware of, and if I could relate it to football, and I know that sounds daft, but you know, you go along to a football game, say it's kids, teenagers, and there's some subs. And that's somebody's wee boy there, and he's standing at the side of the park, he's got his football strip, he's got everything, he's desperate to play. And the guys running that football game, I'm willing them to let him on. Let him on, give him a chance. You know, even if it's only the last 10, 15 minutes, quite often the poor soul doesn't get on at all. And if I could relate it, there's somebody, they've got a guitar, maybe they're not the best guitarist or most experienced in the world, but this is their chance to get up on a stage with a crowd of people and just live that dream. Just for 10 minutes, whatever it is, and you're the guy that's given them that opportunity. And I think it's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. Can I say, the one thing is that I am absolutely obsessed by is making sure everybody gets their turn. Everybody gets a go. I am obsessed by that. Not, I mean, don't get me wrong, not if the thing finishes at, 11:45 and they come in at 11 o'clock. No, but if someone's been there, if there's a crowd been there, it honestly, seriously, it hurts me. And it stays with me if somebody hasn't got up. And I try to make sure the following week, if they're there, I'll say to them, come the following week, absolutely, you will be up early.
You can maybe set some kind of ticket system up, Jim, for the future, like you're in Vodafone or something like that, where you, who's on net. So interesting, just before we move on to equipment, because I'm desperate to talk to you about this, but the thing that always fascinated me when the State Bar Blues Band was on, so clearly the format was always first half you guys, second half jam session or something to that effect. What kind of repertoire, how many songs was kind of in the pool that just to keep it interesting for you? Because this was every Tuesday night, wasn't it?
We started learning stuff. We started doing stuff, Robin Ford stuff and things like that requires a wee bit more.
Yeah.
But it became impossible because the bass players were swapping so much. But it's a funny thing though. We did a tribute night for Walter Trout a few years ago, and it was videoed. And it was one of those things, because obviously we only turn up every Tuesday night. That was one of the very, very few times that we had done a gig outside the State Bar. We don't rehearse, we just turn up and we play whatever is here. And suddenly after all those years, when we did this Walter Trout, I thought, my goodness, we are a good band. It was like, I never thought of us as a band. So we actually, unfortunately, we were supposed to have quite a run of gigs over the last couple of months, April, May, into June. We'd actually quite a good run of gigs that we were supposed to be doing. And that was the first time that we would have ever done a run of gigs as the State Bar Band. But
meant to be.
Has put paid to that. So
now I'm probably inspired by one of those that's closest to me, but I'm also intrigued because some guitarists we do like to name our guitars, and certain people more than others, certain more famous, Lucille for example. So are there introduce us to your little favourite friends, and if any of them have any special names, that would be interesting.
No special names. That's my first electric guitar. I got my 12th Christmas. It was a joint thing from passing my 11 plus and Christmas. It was supposed to be for passing my 11 plus, but my mum said can't afford it. So that was it. It was £11 at the Barrows with an amplifier, which I don't have. It was a kind of no-name.
Hazard a guess. Is it a Hofner Colorama?
Yeah.
Good grief, well done, Graham.
And it was actually my sister, when my mum died, and my sister, I had tried restoring over the years. It's a long story, but I had done a lot of damage to it over the years. I repainted it and all sorts of stuff. So my sister had kind of said, I want to get that restored for you. So she did, and it was between a friend of mine, Bobby Brown, who did the paintwork, and Jimmy Egypt did the electrics and things, and a remarkable job. And I actually occasionally gig it and record with it. I was recording yesterday and used it. So that was my first electric. It's a Dwight. It's an old, a 1963, made by Epiphone. And it was, there's only 75 of these. It was made for a music store that in Illinois, and it was for the pupils. You know, they did teaching. And the claim to fame of these is that this is what Stevie Marriott used at the Rock in the Fillmore. And he says on it, I've got a new guitar tonight, or how do you like my new guitar? And it's one of these, which are very rare. I only know in Britain, Paul Weller's got one, and Dave Gregory of XTC has one. And that's, as far as I'm aware, that's all that there are in Britain.
Oh.
So that it's a great guitar. It plays brilliantly. This is my 1960 Strat, which was mine years ago, and I just got back. A friend of mine that I sold it to, he just sold me it back about 4 months ago, I think it was, 3 or 4 months ago. I'm still paying him.
Well, I'm rubbing my thighs just now, Jim, because as you can probably tell, I'm a Fender fan. I've tried Les Pauls, I've tried lots of others, and I just can't. I keep going back to Strats and Tellys, so that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great guitar.
If I might say so, it's got a beautiful tone. I've listened to Jim playing it on Facebook, and it's an absolute cracker.
It's great. It's a beautiful guitar. It's a 62 SG Les Paul Jr. That was Bernie Marsden of Whitesnake. It was his.
It was his?
Yeah. I told him, I just went up to him and I said, Bernie, you're not good enough for that, pal. Give it to me. And he said, Jim, I think you're probably right. I've got a few guitars. John Fratelli of the Fratellis is a friend of a friend. Mm-hmm. So John, actually, you know, he buys other guitars. He only likes Telecasters, and he buys other guitars.
Good man.
And then he sells the ones that he buys to me cheap. So I've got Hugh That Red Strat. It's his. Oh, that was his Les Paul. This is quite an interesting one. Right, this was John's, and he got it at kind of the peak of his powers. Gibson said to him, you know, as they do with these things, when you just Chelsea Dagger and all this kind of thing, they said, we want to build you a guitar. What would you like? You know, their artist relations. They said, Les Paul said, what would you like? He said, I don't know, because John, he's a great guitar player, actually. I mean, he's been up at the State Bar and jammed. He's a great guitar player, but he doesn't know a lot about guitars. So they said, look, you're a Led Zeppelin fan, aren't you? And he said, yeah, love them. He said, you love Jimmy Page? Yeah. He said, well, we're actually making 2 guitars for Jimmy Page at the moment. It's not the Jimmy Page model. It was just they were making 2 guitars for Jimmy Page. He said, what if we did a run of 3 and we'll give you the 3rd one? So he was like, yeah, I love that. John being John, he was recording, my friend was recording him, a gig, and he was playing this, and my friend said, it sounded glorious, and he just suddenly stopped playing for, John stopped playing for the tape, and he went, this is too good for me.
Really?
So, which it wasn't. I mean, honestly, he's such a good player, a great player, but I know what he means, though. He likes that Pete Townsend thing. He likes a Telecaster, and he likes to hit it because a Telecaster will take that. Mm-hmm. You know, he's got that thing, which I kind of like. I'm kind of like that myself. That's a Telecaster would be my go-to guitar because I like hitting them. But anyway, so I've ended up with it, and it's a great guitar.
Yeah,
I don't understand why Jimmy Page would do that, but I know that story from when it happened. So it wasn't just a selling point. You know, this is something that I knew they had that. So anyway, that's the kind of. I mean, you know, we'll be here for a couple of days if I get through them all. But if that gives you a good enough cross section.
Good, thank you for that, Jim. Actually, so if my God, Armageddon happens and the place starts burning, what do you grab?
335.
Yeah.
Because it was for my 50th, and because it was such a, it's probably the most that I can remember, is just about the most thrilling moment of my life. I always wanted a 335 when I was in my teens. My mum's boss played guitar, and I don't, do you know Les Connell? Have you heard of him? He was a well-known Glasgow player a few years ago, a jazz player. He was the other guitarist in the band, but this guy Bill was more a singer, but he had a 335. And I remember when I was about 18 and at Christmas, and my mum was giving me hints about my Christmas, and she said, I'm getting you something musical and all that. And I was like, oh, I'm getting a 335, getting a 335. Yeah, on Christmas morning, there was a record player. And I'm like, oh, brilliant, Mum. Oh, thank you so much. And so I always wanted a 335, and it never happened at the right moment. It was, my birthday was on the Wednesday, and I came back from the state bar the Tuesday night, and my wife and both my kids, they were up and waiting, and they were like, right, open it now, open it now. So out it came, it was a 335, and I was absolutely speechless, so that, apart from the fact it's a great guitar, it's, for that sentimental thing, obviously my first electric, for what it is, but if I had to save something so that I could use it, I could gig, it would be that. If it was simply for playing, it would be the Nocaster, the yellow one, the Telecaster. If it was simply from that, that would be my go-to as a playing guitar. I only got, before the lockdown, I only got one gig with the Strat. It might be the Strat, but I've only gigged it once, so.
Well, I'm just putting it out there, Jim. So in about 3 and a bit years' time, I'll be 50. And 335s.
That's what you get.
It's the one I've never had. It's the unobtainable for me. I've never tried hard enough, but yeah, that's the thing. I would like. One of the things, just before we move on to effects and amps, ailments as we get to a certain age. Swapping between different guitars and different weights of guitars, tennis elbow, sore shoulders. Do you suffer from any things like this, or do you notice a difference?
I've got, you see my finger, my pinky doesn't go back. Yeah. It doesn't go back. I've got arthritis. I can't remember what this is called now, but I get these, I don't know if you can see that, I've got these knots. Yeah. And it goes across my hands. So that is quite funny, actually, right? You could call it tragic, but it's actually quite funny, is that very often when I go to play a chord, this finger just goes in front of my hand. So even, I'm at a gig, a Lonehead gig, I'm playing it, and this just goes right across in front of the chord. So
would you stick a slide on it and it play open tuning, Jim? It'll be fine.
That's it.
Well, I have got that thing that when I was in my teens, a friend of mine, Alec Bain, about 5 years older than me, and he was a guitar player, and Alec's a lovely guy, great guy, but he was paranoid. He worked in the South Side sawmills, and he played guitar, and he was really paranoid about losing his face. He said it's, again, it's pre-health and safety and all this kind of thing. He said guys just lose their fingers and their hands and all this, He said, I'm just terrified to do it. So he eventually he stopped doing it. But he used to go on about how he practiced with different fingers in case he lost a finger. And I thought, I'm going to do that too. So I'm actually quite adept at playing, quite often I'm so I can just use one finger, and I'll do that. Just
yeah.
You make sure that I can still do it in case I lose any fingers. So I've got all this thing going on, that where if anything goes wrong, I've got something else.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect my lead playing too much. I do notice, I've got to say, I noticed that I'm definitely not as accurate as I used to be. You know, a lot of things like for speed and things like that, I used to be a really, really fast and fluid player, and I noticed that a wee bit, you know, my hand kind of stiffens up a wee bit, and it's not quite there. But the truth of the matter is, as you know, if you've seen me with Lonehead and stuff like that, I'm very gung-ho about it. I don't care that much.
Good.
So long as I can get up there, so long as I can throw myself about, so long as I can do something. I know this used to be inoperable, but now I've known for the last couple of years that you can get it fixed. And I haven't bothered, even though it impairs me, but just, you know, use something else. You know, whatever, I'll play another chord. I'll play another way.
Well, I know that us guitarists complain about the weight of instruments sometimes, but Graham obviously being a bass player, and actually the position of hands and elbows and this, and I know you guys can get shoulder problems and issues quite a bit, can't you, Graham?
Aye, I've done that actually on a couple of gigs of ours. If I always wear obviously the bass on the left shoulder because I'm right-handed, but I will find that my left shoulder will get quite sore during a gig, especially if it's a long gig and towards the end of the set. So I'll take the strap off and put it on the right side, so it changes the position.
Yeah,
obviously.
I had cortisone injections, and it was a early 70s Les Paul. I didn't, you know, in my youth, I did judo, and I got quite a bad injury with it on my shoulder, and it does play up a wee bit from time to time. And then I ended up, I had to go and see a specialist, and the specialist said, "You're a musician," and I said, "Yeah." He says, "Guitar player?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Les Paul?" And so it's the early 70s Les Paul Custom, the heaviest matter known to man.
Yeah.
And
it's a two-man lift now.
Back to my wife, and this, funnily enough, I didn't collect guitars. I only ever had 2 or 3 guitars, and that was kind of the start of it. When I said to my wife, "I need to get a lighter guitar," so I went and bought an SG. That SG. From Kenny Robertson, well, in his shop, went and bought that SG, and I didn't sell anything. And that was the first time that I bought that and didn't sell anything. And that's how all this came about, was from a sore shoulder. So don't let it go to waste. If your shoulder's sore,
another guitar.
I think you need to buy another bass.
Can I ask you, talking about guitars and the weight of guitars and maybe us getting a bit older and things, moving on to amps, because I remember watching you play at the State Bar Jam, and one of the most iconic amps going back in time was the Marshall Blues Breaker. There was the combo that Clapton played through on the famous 6/6 album. But the head that came from that was the JTM 45, and Stevie Flynn made his own version of that. And I noticed that I was extremely jealous, had acquired one of these, and that night I was listening to you were playing Les Paul through it, and the tone in terms of the Les Paul world for blues was just stunning. That's the only word I can describe it. And I know you used that amp, but I know that you then had a dalliance with a Boss Katana, moving into the sort of digital modeling world, and I was very interested to hear your views. You know, obviously there's the sort of logistics and what being practical, and then there's the sort of, you know, weight, etc., and then there's the technique.
Well, the Katana is brilliant. There's a thing that it doesn't do. If you know, like that core sound, just plug into an amp. If you plug into a valve amp, there's a sound there, and you just can't get that in the Katana. But once you start driving it, once you start doing things with it, I think the difference narrows.
Yep.
And I certainly still, I used exclusively, last year, I would say, I used the Katana. I got my first Katana in 2019 in the January, and then I got a Katana, so I had a Katana 100-watt combo, got a Katana head, and I used them. I didn't use anything else. In spite of all my valve amps, I didn't use anything else until about December. So it was almost virtually a year I only used the Katana, and what I found that eventually became a bit of an issue to me was that I was using it as a standalone. So, you know, I wasn't like putting effects in the front of it. I was just using the katana. What I was finding was, you know, is that like, because I was programming it, I would go to a venue and, you know, sometimes the venue's a wee bit dull sounding or a bit bright sounding. And it meant if there'd been a master tone on the katana, it would have been fine. But there wasn't. It was all presets, which meant all my sounds were slightly wrong. And I couldn't go in and reprogram them at the gig. So that started kind of annoying me a wee bit. So I kind of went back more to valves again. But I would say, unless there's a better equivalent comes along, I would maybe get rid of one of my katanas, but I would keep the combo. Because it's just so handy, so light and easy. But if I was to say, it's the thing that we're, you know, if I think about all the guitar players that I really like, and that in my mind that I would aspire to be on that level, and that I would want to be perceived on that level. Not that I am on that level, but just this thing that we are. If I go to the state bar, I want to be perceived as a guitar player who takes himself as seriously as Eric Clapton or Robin Ford or Stevie Ray Vaughan, or, you know, I take myself as seriously as that as a guitar player, and they wouldn't compromise themselves. So I kind of think there's a wee bit of me that thinks, you know, it is a wee bit of a compromise. So maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe I should always be at my best, rather than going, well, this is light, so it'll do.
It's a difficult one. I mean, I'm thinking of Richie. Richie's our vocalist in vintage vinyl, as well as being a guitarist.
Yeah.
Richie lugs all the PA gear, and he lugs all his guitar gear. And well, you can talk, Richie. He's been through 4x12s, all sorts of things, big Mesa setups, and I think eventually you reached a stage where he just thought,
"Yeah,
let's go."
Yeah, so I can't not mention him about Stevie Flynn, as you've mentioned him, because he's a genius for me. So I remember back in the day when I was a 17, 18-year-old, sorry, I was of drinking age, 18-year-old, playing at the Clutha, and I had a PV Tweed amp. And now, whether it was me overworking it, because it was a 3-valve, 3-main, 3 and 4, and actually in the Clutha back in the day when it was jammed.
Was that 1x12, 2x12?
It was a 1x15.
Oh, right, yeah.
Kind of more square looking amp.
Yeah, I know the one, yeah.
So whether it was like you in the State Bar, it was every Sunday night for a long time, and whether it was because it was driven hard, or whether it was because there was copious amounts of flying alcohol in the Clutha, it actually went on fire one night. So I took it to Stevie and left it with him for a couple of weeks. But I think he actually set it on fire once repairing it, because he had to. It was a process of elimination. But anyway, he fixed it, and it was magnificent. I've still got it to this day. But like Graham says, I've gone through 4x12s, Marshalls. I actually sold that to Roy because I couldn't be arsed lugging it around anymore.
It's my job to help him with it.
Well done. But actually, that's a stunning sounding setup. Marshall valve, you can't help. And then I bought a Mesa Transatlantic 30 little micro amp. And a 2x12 upright cab, which I've still got. Again, wonderful sound, and you can switch that down to sort of 5 or 10 watts. It's quite nice. You can drive it at low volume, but it's so damn heavy. So I decided a couple of years ago I was going to go to the dark side and try an electronic. So the Fender Mustang amp, 100 watt, which I can control from my phone. So literally, I can actually go from Prince to Steve Ray Vaughan or Eddie Van Halen sound. Wish I could play like them, but I can switch between the tones with a click of a switch in the phone. So technology-wise, the modulation stuff nowadays is wonderful, actually. So If I was playing to purists, I would use the valve. But if I'm anywhere else, one in one, a guitar in one, amp in the other, set up, program, away you go. Brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, I have to agree. The Katana was a revelation to me, how good it was. The State Bar, I recorded every gig at the State Bar for a year, right? Did a live recording with a good Zoom recorder. And do you know that I sounded the same, all different gear, pedals, amps, guitars, didn't matter what I was using. Every time I recorded it, it sounded the same, whether I did Les Paul or a Strat. I adjust things so that they always sound the same. I kind of think that I adjust them. I think I make everything sound like a 335. I think that's my go-to sound, and I make everything sound like a 335. And there was only one, it was a Telecaster I had a while back. It was a Warmouth Telecaster. It sounded different. And everything else, all my other guitars, and every week was different amps, guitars, pedals. I sounded the same.
Interestingly, Jim, you were saying earlier on, you're playing your Telecaster. It's a guitar that you can really give it big licks, give it loudly. And it just sort of brought to mind, because I remember I was at the State Bar Jam, and there was this guy on the stage, Jim Keilt, standing very sedately, playing lovely blues licks, and the whole thing was just a really nice night. And I think it was about a week later, I can't remember, I think it was an avant-garde. I was in with a friend, we were having a pint, and there was a band playing. And I'm looking up on the stage and thinking, that guy, I know that guy. And it was, you know, this guy was all over the place, totally different, you know, baseball sort of hat, the sunglasses. He was giving it really big licks, a major rocker. And something dawned on me. That's Jim Keilt. You have an alter ego. Here is a person. It's quite incredible. And you were playing, I think you played sort of a Cream number, I Feel Free maybe, and a bit of Rory Gallagher. It was a great night. But tell me, Jim, about this. Does it just happen, or did you work in it from the marketing point of view? And
No, Graham, it's a strange thing. I've got there's part of me that's a muso, and the other part of me, and probably the main part of me, is kind of got this rock and roll punk thing. I am, you know, it's not. I don't play punk music in my house. You know, I wouldn't put on the Pistols or something like that, but I love it if it comes on. You know, it's, and I would so. I just love that thing. I've always loved it. Two sides. There's one of it where the guitar player, and I want to just stand and be as good a player as I can be. But there's this other side of me that just has always, from the word go, it was just like you plug me in, and it's like I've had an electric shock. You know, I love all that thing like Pete Townsend and all that. You know, just that thing, and it's. No, when I do that, when I'm doing that thing, I am totally lost in myself, and it's it's a kind of a weird thing. It's just something I feel, you know, that there's just something that gets me, and even like when I would do it, even like playing in club bands and things like that, you know, like back in the day, I would do that. I would sometimes at some point in the night, you know, when we started rocking up, I would just start throwing myself about. Yeah. And I don't know, I sometimes think, you know, I'm 66, and I sometimes think, Jim, you'll die doing this. One of these things, you know, you're going to do a Tommy Cooper.
The audience love it too, Jim. And the thing is, when somebody's on stage playing and they're loving it and they're living it, and, you know, just as Richie said, that communicates itself to the audience, and it means the audience have a great night. It's a great gig, and that's one of the reasons why Lonehead are the popular band they are.
Thank you very much. You don't think having watched. I sometimes wonder if some of them are out there going, I hope the old guy doesn't die. You know,
I get the oxygen tanks ready.
I do sometimes wonder if people, you know, kind of think, if people was thinking, I hope that old guy doesn't die. Or maybe they're hoping I do. I may be in one of my big solos and then maybe going, I hope he dies.
What a way to go. So
or I might.
I'm going to move us along because we need to talk about CTF first.
Yeah.
I mentioned to David McCallum that we were going to have a chat with you, and he gave me some wonderful words. He said you were a great guy, a CTF stalwart since the Scotia days, and obviously management group member. And that one of the hardest jobs out there, a CTF musical director, obviously an MC, and pretty much he acknowledges he couldn't have ever done it without you. So talk us through your involvement in the CTF over the years.
It was decided that the Scotia wasn't big enough, so we moved to the Clutha. And on the first day of the Clutha, it was only me. I was the only person that brought an acoustic guitar. And there was a stage and so we plugged that in, and Bob Bradley brought his acoustic bass. So there was just Bob and I, and we're just getting people to come up, sing, take my guitar and play. We did that. A few people, more people the next time brought things. We started bringing electric guitars and amps. And at first it was too much. Everybody was bringing amps and all sorts. And there still wasn't a drum kit as far as I remember. Anyway, it started picking up from that. And then Frankie Murray had said that he would like to host it. That was fine. So Frank started hosting it. And I remember thinking to myself, I've known Frank for years. I don't know if you know, or you, Frank, he passed away a couple of years ago, but Frank, I thought, Frank's personality, I thought, Frank, you're not going to like this. Anyway, he did it for a couple of months, and then he went, Huey, how can he do this? He says, you want to take it over. So, yeah, Frank, I was expecting it. So we moved to Ivory Blacks, and I've got to say, that was brilliant, but we only got 2 there, and that's when this hit. But Ivory Blacks was great from the musician point of view, and it kind of transformed into instead of the meeting being important, the music had become important. So Ivory Blacks wasn't great for the meeting, but it was great for the music. Avant-Garde was great for the meeting, but the music, they had issues with volume because it was on a Friday afternoon, it was offices upstairs, the bass, everything was travelling just upstairs. So,
Jim, if I could just say, I think you've been quite modest here, because I went along to a few CTF meetings and there were so many people getting up to play, there was so much happening. It couldn't possibly have worked had there not been an MC of your calibre.
Oh, thank you.
I have to say, I mean, I just love the CTF. There's just such incredible enthusiasm, such incredible involvement, so many people, and everybody there, they're just loving it and enjoying the live music and sharing it and remembering the good old days. But you managed to just keep that bit of cohesion, that keep bit of order, so that it was enjoyable. Because otherwise, as you know only too well, the whole thing can sort of fall apart. And so you really did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And you didn't even mention my good looks.
Well, that goes without saying.
That's very kind of you to say. You know, it's quite weird because I do all the jams. I do with the seat of my pants, and it's quite a strange thing because it can go on. This is maybe a slight insight into it. It can go on. Obviously, we kind of get there with the band and sort things out from about 12:30. Generally finishes about 6. None of it, generally speaking, there's nothing pre-planned. I just got up and whoever's there, I kind of make up as I go along, and that's how I like it. But it's fun, but it's quite weird. There's quite a few times that I've thought, I'm going to stop this because I do find it quite stressful when you're with that thing that you're thinking, well, there's all these, and people don't come in late, so you've suddenly got all these people maybe come in at 4 o'clock who all want to get up and play it, and I've already got in my head, you know, how it's going to go. And then up Jim Keilt, Jim Keilt.
Anyway,
So
there's 30 years of experience, knowing so many people, knowing the bass players, drummers, guitarists. Without thinking twice, you bring that all together and you make it happen, Jim. Fantastic.
thank you very much, Chris. It's very good of you to say that. It's very good. I like everything, you know, it's not, I've got a wee knack for it. And it's not, it's, you know, just, it's, I do what I do.
So I want to talk about your current project, Lonehead. And, I think it's fair to say a wonderful band, small unit. I wonder if you can briefly talk us through it, but an incredibly well-liked band. I think Graham Thompson was telling me that there's probably circa 20,000 followers and endless gigs, and you have this following now online as well. So talk us about Lonehead, the type of music that you play and the guys that you play with.
Great. Well, it evolved. Martin and I and a drummer called Craig Haddon had a band started in 2005 called The Halos, and we were doing covers and originals. We were doing originals in with the covers, but then we were doing totally original material gigs. So we'd gigs, covers and originals, and then original gigs. We found out that there was an old doo-wop band called The Halos, who it's the American doo-wop band, and it was kind of killing us for moving on. So what we did was we changed the original material side of it to Lonehead, and the covers we were still The Halos. Craig left, and so we got Mark Brown, who's a trunk monkey, and Mark did the drums for the original material, Lonehead. So any gigs, original material, any support gigs or anything that we got, it was Mark did the drums. The album had been recorded with Craig on drums, but the videos is Mark miming to Craig. Our album's just out. It's partially out at the moment, Lonehead. You can get it on Bandcamp. But this COVID is going to put us up things. We're going to be, it's going on to Spotify and iTunes and various things. But, and then we're going to get hard copies just for, you know, vinyl and stuff like that. We're going to be doing that. So we started working on the next album, which I'm kind of doing stuff for just now here. And that, because that's something that in the past I've had studios and, you know, things like that. So I'd kind of lost touch with it a wee bit, but I'm back into it. I'm back in the game. This COVID has got me back into recording and back into it a wee bit more serious. And it's fun enough, right? 66. I'm still ambitious.
Yeah.
I still want
Why
to
not?
record. Mm-hmm. I still, you know, I think in this day and age, because of the internet, it's this thing. I think, why not?
Huh?
You know, it's just that thing. I think you don't need to, you know, I don't need to be beautiful. I don't need to, you know, it's not like I don't particularly need to have a particular image or a particular thing. Just if the music's good enough, stick it out. And if someone wants to buy it, they buy it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Good on you.
We're still to reach our prime.
Yes, exactly. Well,
best years have yet to come.
Well,
I think, Graham, I've got to say, for me, I'm better. I rock better. I play better. I am, you know, absolutely than I ever was. Well, ever was. There's maybe, you know, there's various times, like we probably all get it. There's points there's certain few years, you're in a particular band, you're in a particular thing, and it's great. Like that thing I was saying about Middle of the Road, it was great in a certain way. And we were doing a lot of recording then, some good recordings. But just now, and overall with Lonehead, it's the happiest that I am, and it's the best, my favourite band by any measure. It's my favourite band that I've ever been in, and I still just think, I still feel, we've still got a guy, we've got a guy who backs us financially still, a guy who thinks that we could be famous.
Brilliant.
You know, But
Lonehead.
yeah, when I say famous, you know,
I'm on the need.
it's
One
not,
need.
you know, we're not going to bother the Eagles. You know, we're not going to. But just even if we just there's a level that we would quite happily, if we could get a wee tour doing, you know, say the likes of the Ferry or you know, an equivalent of that.
Yeah.
If we could just get a wee, that's success to us. That would be, to me, I would be like delighted if I could just get something like that.
I don't know when those establishments will open, Jim. It might be a tour of the garden centres for the next few months. But a gig's a gig. Thank you for
Big in
that.
Dobbies.
Yeah, playing in Dobbies, there's worse. I've played in worse places. I think the good thing is that with having, I suppose there's a good in every bad thing, but if we take a positive with COVID going on at the moment, you're back to writing and you're back to looking at original material.
Yeah.
We look forward to hearing what that's like and wish you every success for that. So thank you. So
Thank you very much.
it comes to the time of the evening where we turn to our esteemed quizmaster, Mr. Graham Thompson, to test our musical nous.
It's the Vintage Vinyl Big Quiz.
Indeed. Right. Well, chaps, if you're all ready, you can either shout out or...
As long as there's nothing after 1980.
So fingers on the buzzers. Which US state was the title of a Bee Gees #1?
Massachusetts.
Oh, well,
Buzz.
You got to get the elbows out, Jim. Get straight in there.
Get right in there, mate.
next question. Who had a #1 with a groovy kind of love?
The Mindbenders. Phil Collins.
The first band to play it. This was the...
Phil Collins then.
Yeah, Phil Collins. You know, it may have been #1 with the Mindbenders too. I don't know. Well done.
I believe so.
Jim, that's you in the picture.
I'm there. I'm on the
The scoreboard.
Right,
On the board.
get ready, guys. This one, fingers on the buzzers. What blues ain't there no cue for, according to Eddie Cochran?
Summertime.
Well done.
Oh, yes. Well done.
Don't tell me you guys don't remember Eddie Cochran.
Yes.
Oh, aye. Aye.
Probably play it if I had to.
Right, here's one for you. Which veteran blues performer recorded The Healer?
Oh,
John Lee Hooker.
oh,
Yes, Richie. Well done, sir. You sneaked one in there. So I think it's 2 for Jim and 1 for each of you at the moment.
Yes, indeed.
Uh-huh. What was Deep Purple's first hit in the singles chart?
Hush.
No.
Black Knight.
Yes.
Was Hush not a hit?
Was indeed. Uh-huh. Romping
Hush
away.
was a hit, was it not?
And finally, which group were Paranoid on the chart?
Black Sabbath.
Well done, Jim. Well,
Quick off the mark.
no competition tonight, Jim. No competition.
They were, I think they were geared rather towards my age.
I think that fiver was well spent, Jim, earlier. Well done.
Aye.
I think a couple of things. We're obviously going to wrap up, Jim. I know we've had you on for a while, but it's been a pleasure. Obviously, moving forward, we know it's going to be a while before we get back out there. Any thoughts on what you think the musical landscape will look like, or whether we'll just fit back into the way that it used to be? Do you think there'll be any changes?
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a weird one, isn't it? Because, you know, no matter what we fancy doing as bands, are there going to be the venues to do it? I think that's the one. Can they stay open? Can I do like a 2-piece thing as well? That's probably apart from teaching, that's our money earner. Really, that's where we make our money, is by doing the 2-piece thing. I think the likes of the Swan, the Village Inn, and the places, the real music places, I think they'll come back and they'll do what they did. You know, and it'll be fine because that's where everyone went. But there's a few, and I won't name names because they'll be maybe watching this or something, but there's a few of the places that are symbolised with that maybe kind of, you kind of thought that the good nights and off nights, you know, that maybe the Saturdays were good, the Fridays are a wee bit, and it's hard to see them particularly coming back. I don't quite know. This is where both him and I would like, if possible, to step up again the original thing and see if there's some way that we could get an inroad into making that our income, you know. The way we're looking at it, we're going at a different way. But I don't know, what do you guys think?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Jim. It's uncharted territories, but I don't think things are going to be the same. I don't know, maybe ever again. Hopefully not. Hope they will be the same. But a changed world. What do you guys think?
Not just as you do, Graham. It's a very unique situation, and we don't know how we're going to fare after this. I think it'll be make or break for a few venues. I really do. And I just hope the ones that have been used to having the live bands and used to dealing with live bands, are still there. But as Jim says, they're going to be inundated with bands looking to play. We need to get back out and play live. It's in all of our bloods, and many other musicians around the country as well. So, yeah.
I think there's a few things. I've got quite a lot of opinions in this, but I'll try not to share them all. But I think there's some bands out there that do tend to play in the same place very regularly. There are some favourites around. I would like to see, and this is not me touting for business in any way, I just think there's an awful lot of good bands out there that there could be a bit more variety. But then I do understand that the venues can't take a chance. Even if it's 200 quid or 250 quid, they're paying the bands. If they have a bad night, they can't recover that in any way. So they have to draw the crowd. I think it's going to be probably more fruitful for solo acts and duos for a while, Jim. That's my other thought.
Yeah.
Just purely because some of the venues that we all play at aren't particularly big. Even the stages aren't particularly big. So if you're socially distanced on a stage, you're not going to be able to cram in a 4 and 5 piece onto some of the places we play. But I think the only one thing that gives me hope, and the one thing for sure, is that Glasgow won't stand for no live music. It's the one city that even the professional acts that come to, as soon as they finish the gig and they get in front of a press junket or back on a plane to where they came from, they rave about it.
Yeah.
And the Glaswegian people just love live music and being entertained, but they won't stand for it. They'll demand it to come back. So I'm sure somehow, some way, we'll make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope so. I think the State Bar. Well, I think the State Bar will come back. It would be a tragedy if we got to 24 years and we didn't get 25.
Calendar years, I would go with, Jim. I think you qualify for your badge, 25-year service at least.
I
think so.
I'm telling you said so.
I think we're going to start a movement, get you a silver tankard. We'll get that. So thank you. It's been a pleasure. Normally we'll give you an option because you are able to probably recite both very well, or at least perform. So we normally ask for something funny that you remember that's happened in front of you on stage or at a live gig. But we will give you the multiple choice option of giving us a wee noodle to let us depart this evening's festivity.
Lovely. Very good. Well done, sir. Well done. Brilliant.
Well done. Thank you, Jim. Been a legend. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And
thank you very much, guys. It's an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure, mate.
I hope you managed to edit me down a wee bit so that I sounded so I don't talk too much.
Magic's in the editing, I believe. But
Sprinkle that magic dust.
yeah,
Excellent.
brilliant. Yeah, stay safe, take
Fantastic.
care, and we'll see
Great
you
job.
again.
It's a great idea. Oh, I've got to just say, I have thoroughly enjoyed so far. It was great. That was great info. I was really enjoying that about the trumpet. Loads of things that,
Gordon.
yeah, that I hadn't realised. You know, when he was talking about the different things about the trumpet.
We're going to have a whip round and try and get Graham Thompson a 50p for the Lecky meter. So we can
I'll need to switch the lights on, Jim. I'm going for the
Well,
sheet.
that's how we like you.
Disappearing.
Like that, honestly. That's good.
Goodbye. That's enough.
no. Cheers,
Take care,
guys.
thanks,
All
guys.
right.
Guys.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, Jim.
Bye.
Podcast.